crowd that's gathered at Sandown to see the touring cars on their warm-up lap of the first of 7 rounds for this year's 1984 and the 25th Australian Touring Car Championship. Steve Harrington's Roadways car there. And it looks to be a very good championship indeed. I had originally thought that as the last of the championships for this particular category of cars, it wouldn't be very strong, but I suspect it's going to be very even as Dick Johnson does a start and gets his tyres nice and warm. And he's probably got, along with Alan Moffat, probably got a slight advantage, there he is, in a tyre wheel combination. But Dick Johnson perhaps has got the next best combination as he lines up on the front row of the grid with his friend Peter Brock. Dick and his wife Jill and Brock were chatting in a very friendly fashion, the Marlborough Holden dealer team pit area this morning, and very keen jointly to try and see off Alan Moffat in the Peter Stuyvesant car that starts from 3rd grid position. Just to refresh your memory, this race last year, which was a beauty, Alan Grice won from 3rd grid position, as we look at Brock sitting there on pole position.
Moffat late on the grid and having to wind his way down to his grid position, which includes putting his tyres on the grass, the verge, which is not going to please him at all.
33 cars practiced for this race yesterday. Dick Johnson was the second fastest of the field. He was 0.2 of a second slower than Brock, 1/10 under Alan Moffat's lap record, but both at about the time they did in qualifying for the endurance race here last September. Alan Moffat himself 2/10 outside his own lap record, but says, I set the lap record with a slipstream tow up the front straight and the back straight, so he said an 11.1 is about all I'm capable of on my own.
And times have really tumbled in just a year. Remember that at this meeting last year, Moffat claimed the record at 1 minute 12.4. The record now stands at 1 minute 10.9, and Brock's done a 1 minute 10.6 in practice. Moffat's car, left-hand drive for the left-hand cornered Sandown circuit. Moffat has the ability to also go to a right-hand drive Mazda RX-7.
Steve Masterton, who's improved his time at Sandown by 4 seconds over the year from the 2 championship rounds. Just to recap and go on with the results from last year, it was Alan Grice who won from 3rd grid position as we look at George Fury's car. The Nissan Bluebird Turbo, 4 cylinders, swept volume 1.7 litres, but turbocharged, takes it out to about 2.6. The former rally driver there and Australian champion, another rally driver, not known as such, but in fact Jim Richards did very well in New Zealand as a rally driver, as there is just 60 seconds to the start of this 26-lap race, 80.6 kilometres, and all the top drivers agree it's going to be a very hard one. It's a warm day, which won't suit the V8s. Second last year was Peter Brock, 3rd Dick Johnson, 4th Fury, 5th Murray Carter, 6th Steve Harrington. They're all back again this year. Brock, Johnson front row, Moffat, Masterton second row, Fury, Richards third row, Cullen and Grice 4th row, McLeod, Parsons the 5th. And a crescendo of noise is building up and up. The excitement's tremendous. There's 10 seconds to the start and the crowd is ready to yell. They're away. It's a best start for Masterton initially, then Moffat goes like a jet. Brock goes going at about an even pace in front. Johnson falls back. Moffat will probably slip down the inside even second, but Johnson boxes him out. And Masterton tries to bully him too. Fury's 5th. Richards takes over that. McLeod wide and an accident. McLeod 2. So it's one of the Kmart cars. I'm not sure whether it was Cullen. And Johnson only just stayed on the bitumen. That's the second corner. This is what happened at the first.
Oh yes, he's had a big hit. That's Andrew Harris's car, the ex-Peter Brock car, which won last year.
McLeod was 2 wheels in the air there. And has heavily belted the rear of the car, so the race leader is Brock from Johnson, from Moffat, Masterton, And I think it's Warren Cullen, in fact, who's had the accident down there in the Kmart car.
No, it's Harris.
Well, that front part was the accident before he had the second accident.
Down the front straight.
Brock's lead, 1.6 seconds. Can you believe it? Brock. From Johnson, from Moffat, from Masterton, from Richards.
From Grice on the inside of Richards. And then Fury trying to come up the inside of Grice into the braking area.
It's got him, I reckon. Fury, is he the next one we see? He is. And Richards well placed too to go down the inside of him. David Parsons heading another pack further back. 16.7, their standing lap, 145 kilometres an hour for Peter Brock. Masterton ranges past Alan Moffat, which would make Moffat say, look at the power they've got, but then he's got some handling and enables him to pressure Masterton down into the S's. Richards is around. Grice would be delighted with the way the BM's handling. Remember that Richards is driving for the team, and in Frank Gardner, the team manager, that Grice left in some unpleasant tone a while ago.
Now it's Moffat against Masterton down the straight. The Ford fans wild as Steve Masterton upholds their glory. Side by side they go down into the braking area, and it's Moffat who takes over from Steve Masterton.
Very wise of Steve Masterton. The man on his inside there knew a lot more about it than he did, and he was pretty wise not to pursue that argument. The race leader Brock leads Johnson by an amazing, to me, at the end of 2 laps, 2.47 seconds.
Oh, and somebody straight ahead into the safety fence. It's Alan Grice, saved by the tyre barrier from more serious damage.
Alan Grice on a lease of the car for 2 laps. You can see the door was still able to be opened, so it stayed pretty rigid in the passenger compartment.
This is Grice's favourite Commodore, the car that set the 100-mile-per-hour lap record at Mount Panorama 2 years ago. As we look at Grice now, he goes straight on at Castrol Corner. Never even looked like turning, must have lost his brakes. And now the leader, Peter Brock, from Dick Johnson. Alan Moffat in 3rd position, and Steve Masterton now really asserting himself up into 4th. Jim Richards back in 5th position, sliding the BMW all over the track.
Brock's lead over Johnson is 3 seconds. Moffat 3rd, Masterton 4th. And Brock would be revelling in this. A good clear run out at the front of the field. Build a buffer. Look after your tyres. Circulate, pick your lines as you wish. Where the others were in some pretty hectic opening laps. Jim Richards certainly was having his argument. He's in front, as you can see, of George Fury. A bit disappointing with this Bluebird Turbo. It really hasn't progressed very much since early last year. And Brock a second lap at exactly an 11.4, and that's exactly what I'm saying about him. Just able to set his time, look after the car, the tyres, which he will need to do for later in the race.
Moffat very defensive of his 13B engine yesterday during practice, claiming that it just doesn't give him the horsepower that people say it does. He claims that most people reckon he's got an F111 engine underneath there, when in fact he can almost not, as David Parsons goes off in the S's. Parsons brought into the Peter Jansen car at the very last moment, having retired his own vehicle, which was bent rather severely last year on a couple of occasions.
And Peter Brock has done the 3 flying laps exactly at 11.4 every lap.
They call him Peter Perfect, you know why.
Start to the race, and the green car, I'm a little bit surprised, Dick Johnson, that he's not arguing with Brock, although he says we need a little bit of time for development. It only hit the track not much more than a week ago, and there's still some sorting to come, and we know what has to be done. Wayne Eckersley particularly in charge regarding spring and damper rates and so on, but this man's got the sorting done well. He's finding his way as smoothly as he can through the traffic. Doesn't have to jump hard on the brakes lines suddenly. Masterton too doing a shrewd job. He'd be very wise to sit in behind Alan Moffat if he can, try and stick with him, see what he does and how he does it, and if his car's still in good shape later on, then to have an attack. but very sensible of him not to try and argue with Moffat at this stage.
Dick Johnson acting like a taxi driver in Swanston Street at 5 o'clock on any given afternoon.
Still fifth Richards, moving away from sixth place Hungarian-born George Fury. And there are the leading three.
Slower traffic getting out of the way of the big green Falcon.
Peter Brock has dropped to a 12.4. So he's added a second to his lap time in that last lap. Third place Moffat, fourth place Masterton. Johnson, and there 39, just recovering from the spin, John Bundy, Mazda RX-7. 21, John Lusty's car parked off the track on the straight. Masterton, is he getting smoky? Yes, Masterton, I think, starting to overheat.
And he's pulling in to give his pit crew a look at what's happening at the front end of the motor car.
So Steve Masterton starting to fall out of it. Will go to the pits at the end of this lap fairly certainly. Bad luck for him. He was well placed there. Brings Richards to fourth. Fury to fifth.
And Fury right behind Richards now.
Doesn't yet.
Fury right behind Richards. There it is. And George pulls out of the slipstream, maybe not to try and pass, but to try and keep the turbocharger cool. There are no fewer than 5 temperature gauges in the Nissan Bluebird. One for differential temperature, one for gearbox, one for water, one for engine oil, and one for exhaust manifold. And Fury must keep a weather eye on all of them, or that turbocharger is likely to blow. Again, debris on the track. Something fell off one of those two cars. When George Fury looks at his exhaust manifold temperature, incidentally, it sometimes runs to, believe it or not, 1,000 degrees centigrade.
Not by plan. They like to stay more than 120 degrees cooler than that, but it certainly can go that high. As Jim Richards got a bit untidy, tightened on his apex there, kicked both inside wheels a little high off the ground. Masterton doesn't go to the pits. Fury looks for the inside running on Richards. But the clean but hard New Zealand driver doesn't let him do it there, but he might at the next. Fury hard on the picks, on a bit of cement,
and Fury's done it.
Goes into fourth place. Now out after Masterton, who's decided that whatever was happening in the car can be put up with for the moment. Fifth place indeed. But then Richards comes again and takes Masterton, as Masterton really starts to flag.
There's Moffat.
Not far behind Johnson, and it's a 26-lap race. And they're only on their 8th. Fury doing constant wheel work to keep the car exiting smoothly as he flows into the outside of the track. There you see the field. Brock, the second of the cars in the foreground. 2 lapped cars, then Johnson, then Moffat.
6.2 seconds the gap from Brock back to Dick Johnson. Johnson starting to slide the motor car around.
12.6. Dick's crew tell him he's just done. Previous lap. Oh, and look at him snap on the opposite lock. And then further back Steve Harrington in car 4 on the inside.
Arguing with Jim Keogh in car 12 on the outside, and is going to do it. Harrington, he was Alan Grice's teammate last year and learned a lot from the wily and experienced Grice, including how to get across there and make it very hard for anyone to get through, as Keogh now gets everything locked up trying to pass him.
And Keogh didn't stop at all by that. That was silly. And Warren Cullen tucks in and has a crack at him as well. And Masterton goes to the pits.
Disappointment for young Steve. That really was a very good effort on his part. Now across the top of the hill, Steve Harrington in the lead, Warren Cullen behind him, and Jim Keogh back behind them. So we watch Peter Perfect, Peter Brock coming down the main straight, Dick Johnson behind him, pulling out in the green car, then Alan Moffat behind again. And in the 24-year history of the Australian Touring Car Championship, Ian Gagan still holds the record, having won the championship on 5 occasions. Bob Jane and Alan Moffat have both won it on 4 occasions. Peter Brock 3, and Dick Johnson and Norm Beachy, the two crowd pleasers, both have won it twice each. But it's a seesawing battle between Moffat and Brock. Brock on 3 occasions has won it, Moffat on 4. This year Brock reckons it's his turn to break even with Moffat again.
This is the dice for 6th, 7th and 8th place. At the moment, Steve Harrington, Warren Cullen banishing Jim Keogh, the Melbourne solicitor. And the youngest of that lot, 24-year-old Harrington, coming forward of the bunch. 35, turned 36 years old this year. Warren Cullen behind him. Doing a good job at the top, but Harrington best placed. Cullen brave. Still brave. The pressure which Harrington withstanding very well, actually. 5 different cars in the first 5 places, with Commodore leading from Falcon, leading from Mazda, BMW and then Nissan Bluebird Turbo. So that's some variety. Grice's accident and retirement might mean that we've seen him out of the Touring Car Championship, because he was only committed to the first 2 rounds definitely and going to review his points and financial situation as to whether he should continue. So he's been very entertaining last year, but we mightn't see much more of him this year, as Peter Brock finds the track very crowded and does the work for Dick Johnson.
Incidentally, should you wish to buy the damaged Peter Brock, there goes Harrington pulling into the pits and putting it away for the day. And both the Grice and the Harrington cars are for sale at around $30,000 each at the moment, if you'd like them. The left-hand drive BMW of Jim Richards, still with all its computer navigation equipment on board. Jim can, if he wishes, dial up his fuel economy in the cockpit of that car.
A beautifully smooth driver, Jim Richards. Been driven round Sandown by him in a non-race BMW, and it's just delightful to see how much room he can make for himself at the various corners and how little work he does. How smooth but quiet and relaxed he is on the gear shift, the clutch, the brakes, and yet how hard he works the car as Fury comes down the inside of him. And the two drivers argue, and Fury, a little bit cheeky running Richards out wide there. Really was. Richards gave him the room into the corner, and Fury gave him none coming out. I don't think Richards will appreciate that. The Fury stroked away anyway.
Brock now already halfway down the main straight as Dick Johnson comes onto it.
Brock's lead about 5.3 seconds over Johnson, and Brock out on his 13th lap, half race distance at the end of this lap in a 26-lap race. Moffat still holding third, now fourth. Fury fifth, Richards, and the Colt is nearly gone.
Ian Burrell in the Colt Mirage. Well, you've always got to give it a go, haven't you?
Yes, a short moment of heroism. You try to follow the leaders through. The old fallacy that the little cars are quicker through the corners than the big cars. Not quite right, as Burrell just showed. This is fourth and fifth place argument renewed as Richards hauls in Fury. Remembers that he was run wide at the corner onto the back straight a lap ago. And wants fourth place back.
Richards' team manager, Frank Gardner, got a lot of weight off the front end of this motor car over the Christmas break. moved the dry sump to the boot of the motor car and got it right away from where it would cause a lot of understeering in the slower corners. As now Richards pulls out to pass this car very fast down the main straight, but matched by the Nissan Bluebird of George Fury.
What they still emphasise is that the number 1 spark plug on the V8s is about in the axle centre line, and it's number 4 spark plug in the BMW. There's a lot more of the engine forward of the front wheels in the BM than in most of the other cars. And the real question, I suppose, in this race now is Johnson settled in second place at the moment and has in fact managed to pull a buffer on Alan Moffat, and that's interesting. But the question is, over the next half of the race, whether Alan Moffat can make any ground on the leading pair. I think you have to be pretty sharpish to make it on Peter Brock. And even Johnson has a bit surprisingly pulled away, as Fury leading Richards in 4th and 5th place come through some tail enders.
Richards using all the track this time for a big slingshot down the straight, up into 5th gear, and balked by a slower car. Richards very determined to repass Fury.
Peter Brock leads Johnson by 7.6 seconds, who leads Alan Moffat by 4.6, so it's a total of 12.2. What happens to that gap as the race progresses, because that's the real interest. Can this car, a little light Mazda on soft compound tyres, make any ground on the heavier cars that don't point quite so well? The centre of gravity is just a little bit higher, as Fury comes in a bit early to that corner. A touch untidy.
Last year Fury came second in the Australian Touring Car Championship without winning a race. He claimed 2 seconds, a third, 3/4 and a 5th. Held pole position once during the year. This year, of course, he's having to race in the outright class and therefore picks up less points than he did by being a 3-litre class car. Richards, on the other hand, didn't contest the Australian Touring Car Championship last year while waiting for the 4-valve head to arrive for the BMW. The 2-valve head just simply wasn't powerful enough nor competitive. The 4-valve head, incidentally, gives him about an extra 80 horsepower.
Where's Alan Moffat? Alan Moffat has been off the right spot. He slipped by my gaze. But the gap Johnson to Brock has diminished. Come from 7.6 to 6.8.
Moffat passing the Valentine car of Murray Carter. That's Moffat's board there, telling him he's minus 11.
Back out to a 7.7 second advantage again over Dick Johnson. Moffat, in fact, has lost ground on Johnson. He's gone out to 6 seconds in arrears.
And look at the oil stains all over the back of Moffat's car. There are stains all over the spoiler. The aerodynamics would obviously be forcing whatever is spilling from Moffat's car up to the back of the motor vehicle. Peter Brock in the lead. He and Larry Perkins and John Harvey have worked hard over the off-season. They've done a lot of tyre testing with Dunlop and Avon and have chosen to run on Dunlops today. They've been looking for minute advantages. They've done a lot of suspension work on the motor car, looking to make the car lighter to handle. And even as late as yesterday afternoon in practice, they were still experimenting, looking for the very best balance between the front and rear of the motor car.
Real interest as Peter Brock looks to have this round one of the 1984 Touring Car Championship fairly well within his grasp is that he will not be doing 2 rounds of the championship as we look at third place Moffat, because he is definitely going to drive as we look again at the oil stains on the left rear of the car. It's not right. Doesn't normally travel like that. Moffat has some sort of mechanical problem. Peter Brock will do the Le Mans 24-hour race in a top Porsche 956 twin turbo car. So in June he'll also do the Silverstone race before that. So when the Queensland rounds, Lakeside and Surfers are being held, Peter Brock will be in England and France, hitting speeds up to 370 kilometres an hour and averaging around 200 kilometres an hour at the Le Mans 24-hour race, as we see Moffat's crew telling him he's 14 seconds in arrears.
And that's 3 seconds down on the last lap.
On that man, Peter Brock.
Dick Johnson is obviously going to develop this car very well in the next couple of rounds. He has some very top people with him. Wayne Eckersley, former Formula One mechanic with Alan Jones. And George Shepherd, formerly with the Holden dealer team.
On their 19th lap in a 26-lap race. Behind Peter Brock, Dick Johnson, Alan Moffat is still 15, George Fury 31, Jim Richards 8, Warren Cullen 12, Jim Keogh 10, Rusty French, and number 3, Peter Jansen's car, David Parsons.
And here comes Richards down the inside on George Fury into the braking area. Saw a car in the way, and Richards has got it. He's taken over from George Fury.
And goes round the outside of
Mike Emery. Fury now fights back, coming up into Castrol Corner, and he's got it on the inside. Richards now challenging side by side up the back straight.
390 horsepower from the inline 6-cylinder engine, but revving to about 8,000 odd revs, where Fury with the boosted turbo in the Nissan Bluebird does less revs, but gets the thing a lot of torque from the turbo boost, but only about 300 horsepower. So a lighter car, Jim Richards' car weighing in at about 1,220 kilos, hoping to get back to his minimum weight limit of about 1180. Commodores, Peter Brock about 1230. Johnson's car much heavier than that though, and also a bigger engine and much more power.
Positions after 20 laps, you can see Brock by a country mile from Dick Johnson, with Alan Moffat limping in third position. Mind you, limping pretty quickly. Flames from the BMW. Fury's turbocharger, incidentally, spins to 180,000 RPM.
Interesting to ponder whether Jim Richards and George Fury might be able to catch Alan Moffat in the latter part of the race. It won't be by virtue of their own lap times, but by virtue of Moffat running into further problems as they come up to lap Murray Carter. The next round of 7 in the Touring Car Championship is March the 11th at Symonds Plains in Tasmania. Then we take you on the 1st of April to Wanneroo Circuit in Western Australia. We'll be covering all rounds on ABC Sport, as well as quite a number of other motor race meetings through the year. We'll be doing the Sandown endurance race on the new circuit here, 4.5 kilometres around. Moffat to Richards is 12.27 seconds, incidentally. If we look at Dick Johnson, we'll be covering a number of motorcycle meetings as well. A lot of top motorsport ahead of you this year on ABC TV.
And there's green stuff. Dick Johnson. The car within 2 meetings, I think you'd probably find, will be incredibly competitive with Peter Brock. At the moment, just to be in second position in this race in a brand new motor car which first fired a shot only a week ago is quite an achievement for the Dick Johnson crew from Queensland. I asked Wayne Eckersley whether he felt that he was only at the stage he was in preparation for the James Hardy 1000 last year when the car crashed heavily. Eckersley said, no, we've picked up a few things from this since then, but admits that they're still behind the 8 ball and probably about 3 months behind in their development program.
12 seconds the gap from Moffat in 3rd place to Fury and Richards battling away in 4th. So not much gain in the last lap and a half by Richards on Moffat.
Moffat failed to finish this round of the Australian Touring Car Championship last year with rear axle problems after getting involved in a braking duel, but still went on to win the Australian Touring Car Championship. 166 points with 4 wins, a second, a third, and only 1 failure to finish here at Sandown. There's our friend in the little Colt again. Oh, and this time he's hurt it. Ian Burrell in the Colt Mirage. It's parked at a fairly precarious position on the track at the moment, and the officials and the driver fairly wisely decide to abandon it, but they've got to get it out of there before the faster cars come through again.
Richards due, the next car. The flags wave furiously and quite rightly, and here he comes. He's now 12.7 seconds in arrears to Moffat, so the chance of Moffat slipping back behind, or to worse than 3rd, seem not to be very real.
And abandon ship is the order of the day, and that is not the right place to leave the motor car. Obviously everything's locked up under the front with constant velocity joints not wanting to turn anymore. But this is going to be something of a shock to Peter Brock as he arrives at the end and into the braking area. Car 47 is Dean Lindstrom. That's Warren Cullen in the Kmart car. There's Brock. Passing Jim Keogh.
Johnson has pulled out to 11.14 seconds on Moffat, who has an even greater lead over Richards, who's now pulled out about a second on. Alan Moffat will be very disappointed with his inability to match it with the V8s on this track. But then again, it's a track that, if any, in the touring car round, should suit the V8s more than most. Nevertheless, he was able to cut and thrust and argue about the lead last year, Alan Moffat, as Peter Brock goes out on his final lap now. Cruises out to the new exit point for the Yellow Terra corner and is now less than 2 kilometres from victory in round 1 of the Australian Touring Car Championship, the 25th year in which it's been conducted. It hasn't always been a series. That was last won by Peter Brock back in 1980. Dick Johnson won it the 2 following years, and of course Alan Moffat last year the first time that a Japanese car had taken the Australian Touring Car Championship. Well, in a quite unchallenged run, Peter Brock down through the S's, out into the back section, very tidy and easy, never got into an argument at any time during the race, was able to look after his car while most others had some form of a problem with another driver, and did it in the way that he knows so well for the final time around the 3.1 kilometre Sandown circuit that's brought him so many victories. This one taking him to the lead after the end of round one in the Australian Touring Car Championship. Peter Brock, Holden Commodore 5 litre V8 from this man, Dick Johnson.